All right. Now that we got everything cleaned up and our new bearings packed and installed, we are ready to assemble the hub and everything, put it all back together. So we're going to start with this spindle right here. And the first thing we're going to do is put some grease in here on this little roller or needle bearing. Got to make sure that all the bearings are well lubricated when everything goes back together. All right. Now we get down in here in our box and put this little seal on top of there. You can see how that's installed there. You got to make sure that it's facing this direction, otherwise it won't seal good. On top of that, we put this little washer, the bevel towards the truck. Alright, now we take this seal, and this seal slides down on the hub, or on the axle, and goes over, or goes on this flange back here by the U-joint. Just stretch that around that flange right like that. Set that there. Now, not going to hurt anything, put some grease, get you a little extra grease and put it around on the back side where these seals rub. Grease the seal good. Put your plastic washer right down on there like that. Slide the spindle up on there. And give it a little tap to get it everything to line up right. This thing just does not want to seat in there. Now that the spindle's on there, we got to put our backing plate up there because it needs to go on before any of the rest of this stuff does, because it goes behind the drum or the brake disc and hub and everything. So we'll take this, wipe it out a little bit. Make sure when you're installing this that you put the notch for the brake caliper in the right position. It goes in it goes at right about the 10-11 o'clock position when properly installed. Okay, we got the backing plate installed and bolted on, and now the spindle is bolted down tight. So we are ready to reinstall the hub and brake disc assembly with the fresh bearings in it. So we just take this and check back here and make sure we got plenty of grease on the seal and everything back here is good. Bearings in the place that it should be. And this piece, this is ready to go back on. So we'll take it and very carefully, so we don't damage the seal, slide it up on here until the bearing finds its spot. Alright, now then, push the front bearing in there so that everything lines up straight, and we're going to put our hub nut on. Now the back nut is this nut with 6 notches and a little pin on it. You got to make sure that you put the pin to the outside, otherwise you'll run into some problems. And we'll take this piece and slide it, actually, yeah. We'll take that piece and slide it back in here and get the thread started. We can get our 1/2-inch drive wrench and our special socket up on here and start tightening the nut down, and this will pull the hub up, or push the bearing races down and pull the hub up on the spindle where it's supposed to be. Alright, so proper installation of this of the hub nut on these trucks requires you to torque it. According to the GM service manual, the nut should be torqued to 50 foot-pounds while spinning the hub in order to properly seat the bearings, then backed off and torqued to 35 foot-pounds while doing the same thing. And then you install the lock ring. This is not a good way to do this. Okay, there's 50 pounds. So now the GM manual says to back it off and then retorque to 35 pounds. While spinning the hub. Okay. Now, everything turns freely. Now, you have to put this special retention washer in. Now, this washer has a little tab that goes in the keyway in the threads of the spindle. And all these little holes line up with that pin that is on the retaining ring. So if you put it in there and it doesn't line up, GM says to back off until it does. So back off to the next hole. Lock washer is seated with the pin coming through one of the holes and the tab lined up in the groove on the spindle. And the next thing you want to do is put on your lock nut. Make sure it's all clean and you don't get any nasty shit up in your hub. And thread the lock nut on. And GM says that the lock nut is to be torqued to 150 foot-pounds. All right, 150 foot-pounds. Once this is seated. All right, right there. Now, the hub is in its place where it should be on the spindle, and everything's torqued down and tight real good. So now what I like to do is I like to take the grease gun and run around the edge here and add a bunch more grease. Fill in the empty space, because you can't have too much grease. Alright, now you're ready to install your hubs. Right here I have my Warn Premium Manually Selectable Hub. Now, if you were paying attention like you should have been if you're going to do this on your own truck, you'll notice that I haven't put these back in yet. These came off from behind the original locker, and they sat back there and held the axle in its position in front of the spindle. Well, they don't fit with this hub in place. So with this locking device in place, because they space it too far out and it needs to float in the housing a little bit behind its lock ring. And if you have those two, the washer and this retention ring in there, it won't do that. So according to the instructions, the Warren's installation instructions for this hub, certain models, including 82 to, or maybe I think it was 80 to 84 General Motors vehicles, which this is a 1982, you may not be able to run that ring, and according to the installation instructions, it's not necessary. So we'll see how that turns out, but Warren says I don't need it, so and it won't fit, so I guess I don't need it. Now I'm going to go in here and add some grease to fill in these splines, because I like grease. And then this is the hub locker, and it just slides right in there and lines up with the splines on the axle and the hub and sits in there like that. Then you take this locking ring that comes in the kit and slide it right up in here in front of the hub, and it seats down in this little channel. Now, the next step is to take these little screws. These are the screws that hold the outside part of the hub onto the unit here. And it says to take a couple of them and thread them in there a little bit so you can have something to hold on to, and see, does it float back and forth a little bit. And if you'll notice, it does float in and out just a little bit there. So that's good. The Warn manual says it needs to do that in order to function properly. So now we're ready to put the cap on. So again, I'm going to take my grease gun and fill this stuff up. Right there in the center around all those splines. And I'm going to take my cap, drop a couple of these screws in there, and they will help me line it up where it's supposed to be on the locker. And then it's just a matter of taking the rest of your screws and putting them in their spot and getting them started. Tighten everything down. And there you go. Once everything's all tightened up, she's ready to go. Got brand new fresh bearings in there, fresh good lock-in hubs for the four-wheel drive. And now all you got to do is put your brake caliper back on and bolt a wheel up, and she's ready to go.